Okay, we are live streamed.
All right, good morning, everyone. This is Wednesday, November 24th, and this is the regularly scheduled meeting of the Lincoln County Board of Commissioners. We are being recorded and we are being transmitted live on YouTube. And if you wish to make public comment, you'll have an opportunity to do so when we come to that item on the agenda. And Mr. Miller will coordinate access to the meeting for those wishing to do so. First item on the agenda is called a meeting to order. I have now done so. Next, we will establish a quorum. All three commissioners are present, which does constitute a quorum. Next item on our agenda is adoption of the consent calendar. And these are items of a routine nature or items that have come before the board previously. If commissioners or staff wish to highlight an item, they may do so at this time. Otherwise, I will entertain a motion to adopt the consent calendar as presented.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
I will second.
All right, it's moved and seconded. I will note that we do have 3 Board of Commissioner meeting minutes, 2 of which are our most recent meetings in November. And I believe we have 1 or 2 minutes from prior meetings outstanding, and after which we will be current. So that's some good news. Having said that, that's been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
That motion carries. Thank you. Next item on our agenda is a decision or action item. We have 2 items to discuss. First item is the response time waiver for response time waiver and ASRC, which is our own ambulance response committee. And this is a response time and ASRC recommendation of addition of Bls Ambulance for PWA and South Lincoln Ambulance, presented by Jeff Mattia. Jeff, I see you are present, and please expand on some of those acronyms in your presentation, and welcome.
Thank you, commissioners. So again, we submitted a request to the Board of Commissioners a couple weeks ago with a recommendation from the Ambulance Service Review Committee, which is also known as the ASRC. And that's the committee that assists the Board of Commissioners in overseeing the ambulance operations EMS system within Lincoln County. I understand that there was a public comment letter submitted to the board, and if I may take a few minutes to address some of the specific items that were listed in that letter. Would that be okay?
Please go ahead.
Okay. This was a letter from the Chief of Depot Bay Fire. I did receive a copy of it late last night, and I'll try to be brief and try to address just some of the specific things in there. First, he talks about how the BLS ambulance that we are requesting would replace an ALS ambulance. I want to iterate that is not the case. Our request is not to replace an ALS ambulance with a BLS ambulance. And for those that are listening, an ALS ambulance is staffed with a paramedic and EMT, and a BLS ambulance is staffed with 2 EMTs. The BLS ambulance.
So Jeff, I'm sorry to interrupt. Just to clarify, you have on the ALS ambulance individuals that have a higher level of certification?
That's correct. Yeah, a paramedic is allowed to do advanced life support things such as give medications, administer IVs, things like that, where a BLS, a basic life support, is staffed with an emergency medical technician that is allowed to do some types of patient care, treat only specific complaints from a patient. A BLS ambulance, a basic life support ambulance, is generally used in other systems to respond to things like lift assist calls, patients that have a complaint that don't require paramedic intervention. And most common ones are a back pain that's something that's going on for several days or several weeks. somebody that may have a sprain on a wrist that needs to go get an x-ray, things like that. That crew can also take a patient home from the emergency room. They can also take patients to their MRI appointments and so on. The idea behind using that type of ambulance, it saves us from having to take a paramedic staffed ambulance out of the 911 system to handle some of those other types of calls, which is currently what we have to do. Does
I
that
thank
answer
you for
your
that.
que- Yes. One of the things Chief Daniel points out is that we were asking the fire departments to subsidize our operation, and that's not accurate. When we talked about the BLS ambulance, a situation came up where, and it can happen, where they arrive on scene and a call turns out to be more than what the initial dispatch indicated. And the fire departments were wondering that if they had a paramedic on scene, instead of waiting the additional time for a paramedic ambulance to respond, could their paramedic join us in the back of the BLS ambulance and provide transport to the hospital with that patient? And
could you provide an example of that? Like a
yeah,
call?
so sometimes we'll go to a realistic example is we respond to a fall patient. Patients fell down, it was witnessed, and sometimes I'll come in as a low priority call. So that might be a situation where a basic life support ambulance is dispatched to that. They show up. With every EMS call, generally the fire department responds to all EMS calls for the most part. So I'll use North Lincoln Fire, for example. The fire department shows up, the BLS ambulance shows up. The fire department has a paramedic that's on scene, so they're the highest level of care. They would evaluate the patient. And let's say that paramedic finds out that they're having a cardiac arrhythmia or a rhythm that needs to be treated by a physician. That is something that's beyond the scope of the BLS ambulance. And the fire crew would say, well, we need a paramedic ambulance. We would dispatch a paramedic ambulance. And, you know, if this is a critical patient, if they had arrhythmia that was, say, life-threatening, the fire department was asking, could that paramedic jump on the BLS ambulance, maintain care of the patient, and transport to the hospital using our ambulance, basically. That could save valuable time for a patient. So that was the idea behind that type of ambulance and that type of call. Does that make sense? Okay. So I was asked to present a draft of a protocol and a mutual aid agreement specific to having that type of operation available to the fire departments if they chose to participate in that. In no way were we asking the fire departments to make that a policy and procedure, but I did have a couple agencies ask if they could do that. So as requested, I did draft that up and presented that at the last Fire Defense Board meeting. And that's still a work in progress. And we're in the process of just kind of formalizing and writing up a mutual aid agreement or a memorandum of understanding and finalizing a protocol so we would be able to do that. Again, it's not something I'm asking the fire departments to be required to do, but in fact, we were asked if that would be something they could do. The chief talks about our staff that is being underpaid, overworked, etc. And I just want to clarify, our wages and compensation package do match that of other private ambulance companies at that level, if not in some cases above that level. Our folks are overworked right now because we are short-staffed, as is every other public safety agency, not only in the county, but throughout the state and throughout the nation. It is something we're trying to address as quickly as possible. We're trying to make sure that our paramedics and EMTs are compensated fairly and adequately. We just offered our paramedics $10,000 for a 2-year commitment to stay on board with us, which is what some other agencies are doing. And I am happy to say more than half of my paramedics have signed a 2-year agreement to remain committed to Pacific West Ambulance and Lincoln County. Depot Bay brings up an issue of response times, and this is something I did mention at the last Board of Commissioners meeting about a discrepancy I found in the contract with the type of area that Depot Bay and Glen Eden Beach are in versus what the contract specifies as urban, suburban, and rural. Again, I believe I'm taking the proper steps by bringing it to the Ambulance Service Review Committee's attention. I asked to be put on the agenda for the ASRC in February to start addressing the concern that we have. And the concern really is Depot Bay is right now listed as a 12-minute response area, but by definition of the contract and by the latest Census Bureau numbers, it really should be classified as a rural environment. The chief mentioned something about a last Tuesday incident where they had to wait for an ambulance from Pacific City. Unfortunately, there was not enough information in that comment for me to really look at, other than I did go back and look at last Tuesday morning as indicated in the letter. There was a time period where we had 5 911 responses within an hour's time, and trying to keep in mind that each call that we respond to and transport takes that unit out of service for anywhere from 45 minutes to approximately an hour. So there is a chance that depending where, if that was the time frame where his call came in, if it could have been, he would have been the 6th ambulance needed, which we did not have on. And a mutual aid request would have been sent to Tillamook and or North Lincoln Fire. But again, I don't have enough information to dig deeper into that, though I'm more than happy to do that if I can get the additional information. Chief Daniels talks about the mutual aid agreement, about how North Lincoln Fire was asked a couple times last month to assist us with some nighttime coverage. And yes, that is true, but it was also done in the spirit of what a mutual aid agreement is. If we have an unexpected sick call that drops us to 3 ambulances, let's say, then we do ask our mutual aid partners, depending on where we need them at, if they're able to assist out. So I kind of see that the same as if North Lincoln has a situation, they ask Depot Bay for mutual aid cover, or if Newport has a situation, they ask Depot Bay for coverage, or vice versa. If Depot Bay has a shortage, they ask one of their neighboring partners for coverage. So I believe we've done that in the spirit of what our mutual aid agreements are designed to do. Kind of the final thing I wanted to talk about was Chief Daniels talks about the design of the ASA plan that was before the Board of Commissioners over the summertime. And this was a plan that was designed and that we were invited to help participate in revamping a very old ambulance service area contract, which is being done by several counties throughout the state. And in almost all cases, the ambulance service provider for those counties was invited and participated in the design of that plan. Not so much from a standpoint of we want to make it so we get the contract, we want to make it so that it is a viable and up-to-date plan that is consistent with what the Oregon Health Authority is looking for, what the communities are looking for, and what the Board of Commissioners would be looking for. We are, as Chief Daniels said in his letter, he's trying to do the right thing by his citizens. He was hired to do that by Lincoln County, and we're just in the same thing. We want to be doing the right thing. We absolutely want to serve the citizens of Lincoln County well, as we've done for over the last 30 years. I always like to be upfront. I like to be transparent. And I came to the Board of Commissioners wanting to make sure they knew where we stood, that they heard it from me personally, not through rumor vines, rumor mills, things like that. We are committed to serving Lincoln County. We are doing everything that we can to get staffing levels up, to provide the service that Lincoln County deserves. And I thank you for your time.
All right, so just for clarification, highlight again what this request is asking.
Okay, so what we're asking is to have our response times waived. So in our contract, we're required to make response times within a certain time frame. Because of the staffing shortage that we're experiencing, really since about the beginning of summer, when really this pandemic really started taking off and we started having folks leave and so on, our response times have crept up, which put us outside the requirements of the contract. While there's no financial penalty per se, there is a risk that the Board of Commissioners could cancel our contract and seek ambulance service from somewhere else. What we're asking by trying to be upfront with everything is that for October, November, December, that we have our response time requirement waived to give us a chance to catch this up and to get in a good position to resume meeting our response time compliance. And again, we're also having a difference of opinion in one specific zone currently. Again, that's being brought forth to the Ambulance Service Review Committee. The second request is, while I really couldn't find it in our contract, I wanted to have the ability and your permission to be able to have that extra BLS ambulance in our system to provide a little bit better level of service, not only through this pandemic, but to continue that after things settle down, our staffing levels do get back up. I, as well as I believe ASRC, see that as an added benefit to the citizens of Lincoln County.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, questions or comments?
Mr. Chair, one
Commissioner
question.
Hall.
Yeah, thank you. One question. The request is for October, November, December. You know, all of October has passed by, most of November. The reason for it being retroactive, I might guess that it's in case there are any complaints about not meeting response times on calls in recent weeks, but I'd just appreciate clarification on the reasoning behind that request, the timing.
And that would be correct, Commissioner Hall. We know we have a couple zones that we will not be in compliance for October, November, and December.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have at this time, Mr.
Okay,
Chair.
thank you. Commissioner Jacobson.
Yeah, thanks, Commissioner Hunt. Commissioner Hall asked my first question, so I'll move on from that one. My second is just a comment that, you know, I too would be supportive of the extra BLS ambulance. You know, I know that's not a replacement for the other ambulance services, but I see that as a benefit to our system, especially when you're trying to be creative, or at least that's how I see it, trying to be creative and solve the staffing problem that you have right now. I guess the second thing I'm going to say is I don't take this decision very lightly. I don't like being in this spot. I don't want to give this waiver. I don't see a whole lot of other choices, but I don't like this. And so I would ask that even though, as Commissioner Hall pointed out, October already happened, November almost already happened. We're not quite to the end of it yet, but close. December has not happened yet. I would ask that maybe on a weekly basis, we receive an email or some kind of update on not just how it's going with the waiver, but how it's going on you trying to get out of the current situation you're in, so that we can kind of monitor that. What I don't want to happen is us get to the end of December and then just need another extension for another 3 months. I would really like to monitor the progress and see where you're at on, you know, getting to an ultimate solution.
And I am more than happy to do that. Just get a quick update. So as of right now, we have a total of 4 paramedics in our own paramedic school, so to say. It's a contract we have with university out in Boston that specializes in remote paramedic programs. It's been authorized by the Oregon Health Authority. Two of those graduates will happen in, I believe they'll be out of their internship and everything by end of February. They should be into our 911 system by April 1st. I have 2 more students that are in other paramedic programs, one of which will graduate again at the end of February, which would be the College of Emergency Services located in Milwaukee, Oregon. And we have a 4th one in the paramedic program that we offer that unfortunately won't be out until summer. I've also hired 2 experienced paramedics that have signed a letter of job acceptance. One of the things that was holding us up was housing. I was able to find a house to rent for one of them in Lincoln County, and the other found housing in Salem. Those both slated to start the beginning of January and should be done with their training with our system by the end of January. We've hired 4 additional EMTs that are just finishing off their training. So we're seeing improvement, but again, this isn't going to be a quick fix, but I am more than happy to provide a weekly update to the Board of Commissioners.
All right, so I'll ask, I guess, the question that occurs based on the times that you expect those individuals to have completed their training and be available to work for you. Is January 1st going to be a sufficient date to terminate this extension or waiver?
To be honest with you, at this
Please.
point, it's hard for me to say. I would say probably not. We may come back and ask again in January through March, but my goal is to get us back in compliance by January. So I want to make sure I'm doing everything possible at this point. So at this time, I would say my request is just for as written, just through December 31st at this time.
Okay. And by waiving the response time, is that an open checkbook, i.e. there's no time response expectation at all?
No, that is absolutely not an open checkbook. We're still committed to trying and attempting to meet each response time. There is no delay in dispatching. Where we see our struggles is when we have those multiple calls dropping. For example, in Chief Daniel's letter using last Tuesday, when I went back and looked, when we get 5 calls within that hour's time frame, that does strain the system. And when we have only 4 or 5 ambulances on, it is very difficult for us to meet response times, especially if the 5th ambulance happens to be coming from Newport into a Lincoln City call. So no, it is not a open checkbook. We still will report to the Ambulance Service Review Committee our response times, which will also be provided by WVCC. So no, we still aggressively, and I still track it daily, making sure that we do every effort to make sure we're making our response times.
All right, thank you. Any other questions or comments from our commissioners?
Mr.
Commissioner
Chair.
Hall?
Yeah, I noticed that Newport Fire Chief Rob Dahlman, who is the chair of the Ambulance Service Review Committee, is online for the meeting this morning. And I just wondered if he might, since this committee is the body of experts who we've chosen to advise us on subjects like this, if he has, any further perspectives on the committee's discussion and decision that might be helpful to us as we head toward a decision.
Absolutely a good question. Commissioner Jacobson and I have now both experienced Commissioner Hall being a little bit ahead of us. I was going to call on Mr. Dahlman, who is the chair of the Ambulance Service Response Committee, and ask him for his comments and thoughts. So, Mr. Dahlman, I see you're at least present. Would appreciate your thoughts.
Sure, thank you. So Commissioner Hall, I'm the fire chief of North Lincoln Fire, not Newport Fire, just to make that short correction.
Oh, I'm sorry. I know. I knew better. My apologies.
I know we've known each other for a little while, so that's not a big
Yep.
deal. So I guess a little perspective. The ASRC had a special meeting on September 30th when we discussed this, and it was a decision that we talked about at length, just like you folks are now. It's kind of interesting that Chief Daniels put this letter together, considering his deputy chief or assistant chief, Tom Jackson, is the one who actually made the motion for allowing the BLS ambulance there, and then seconded the response time variance. So I'm not sure if they just didn't have a get together before that to discuss these things. So Depot Bay Fire has been well involved in the discussions and the decisions that were put forth by the ASRC committee. I see both of those things enhancing the service that's going on, making sure that Pacific West is doing their due diligence to provide the best service that they can for the county. And again, the ASRC unanimously supported, well, I can say for the suspension response times, there was one no vote, but the rest of it was in providing a BLS ambulance was unanimous to do that. I do see, and I respect Commissioner Hall, you talking about that extension there, and I appreciate Jeff trying to do that. I'd hate to see him come back here at the end of December or January saying, hey, we need another 3 months. My personal opinion, this is not of the ASRC, is I think maybe we should extend that, just as we're doing with the BLS, is allow it to operate till the end of March. But that's my personal opinion, not the ASRC. With that, I also want to commend Jeff. So when he came forward with the Fire Defense Board here a couple of weeks ago, he did offer up a mutual aid agreement for that paramedic getting on the BLS ambulance if needed. And the mutual aid agreement had compensation attached to it. And so we decided that was an individual agreement with each fire agency if they wanted to participate, that he wasn't asking for a blanket participation from all the fire agencies in the county, because several of those agencies don't have paramedic staffing to help them. So they did come up and say, so they're going to make a little bit more money based on their reimbursement rates, and they're going to pass that off onto the fire agencies that help them. So I'd be happy to answer any other questions that you may have. Just fire away.
Appreciate those comments. Commissioners, questions or comments? All right.
The only other thing I'd like, if I could real quick, is add is that we are, as the ASRC committee, we had proposed and put forward a revision in the ordinance and an update on the plan, the ASA plan. And I hope to see that come before the commissioners very quickly here, because I know that as we delayed this for a year because of COVID and getting our plan put together. I just like to see that maybe we put a little emphasis on making sure that ordinance is completed and that the updated ASA plan for the county is taken care of before we go out for reassignments, which the letters will go out sometimes in January, February for reassignment occurring by the end of June. So we're kind of under the gun for that a little bit. If I could beg for a little time on that you guys can discuss that, I'd appreciate it. That's it for me. Thank you.
All right. So noted. I guess at this point, I'll look to my fellow commissioners. I think we recognize the January 1st response time waiver may be an issue, but I think at this point, that's been the recommendation that's been presented to us by staff. I believe deadlines can help us meet our expectations, but we recognize that due to circumstances, there may be a necessity to extend that potentially one more time. Thoughts, commissioners, or I'll entertain a motion? Or not?
Oh, I was about to speak. I'll make a motion that we provide a response time waiver as outlined in the ASRC recommendation.
I'll
And-
second. I'm sorry.
Well, I was going to say, and are you moving to support the recommendation of an addition of a BLS ambulance for back west and South Lincoln ambulance?
Sorry about that. Yes, I'll amend my motion to your words.
Okay, so Commissioner Hall?
I will second the amended motion.
All
And
right.
could I
So
just say, I'm sorry,
Sure.
just a couple of comments. Earlier Commissioner Jacobson said she doesn't take this decision lightly. I don't either, and I'm sure you don't either, Mr. Chair, but we are receiving this recommendation from the body of professionals we have to advise us on this request, and I think we've been given sufficient explanation and justification to approve it. So that's why I seconded the motion.
Okay, well stated. All right, it's been moved and seconded to approve the to approve the waiver of response time and the ASRC recommendation of addition of a BLS ambulance for Pac West ambulance and South Lincoln ambulance. Is there any other discussion or comment? All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
That motion carries. Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Mattia and Mr. Dahlberg. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, commissioners. I will be sending you weekly updates.
And we'll look forward to them. Thank you. And Mr. Dahlberg, your comments about the agreement are noted and I think are very appropriate. All right, we'll move on to the next item on our agenda is a decision item again, a resolution and distribution of House Bill 5006. And I believe our county assessor, Mr. Davidson, is present, although I do not see him. Is somebody else here to address this matter?
Chair, I just wanted to let you know that Joe is not with us today. Maybe from last week's discussion, he kind of thought that it was approved or likely to be moved forward. So, but he's not here with us. And I just wanted to let you know.
Okay, well, I believe the discussion was held 2 weeks ago and I was not present at that meeting, so I apologize for my ignorance. I guess fellow commissioners, any thoughts or comments, or are you prepared to make a motion?
I would be prepared to make a motion or second a motion if Commissioner Hall wants to do that. I think Joe's presentation was pretty clear and outlined, and this is basically.
Yeah, I don't have any issues with it. I just was not present 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm in favor of moving forward as well. This is something we need to do to be able to access this tax reimbursement money, not only for county operations, but for all the other taxing districts that were impacted by the loss of tax revenues from destroyed buildings.
Yep. All right, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the resolution and distribution of HB 5006.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
All right, that motion carries. Thank you. All right, we'll move on to next item, which is discussion or information, and that is the situation regarding the STR moratorium that the county passed. That moratorium is in effect through today, or excuse me, through next Tuesday, November 30th. And County Council Yule or others were interested in your recommendation.
Right. Good morning, commissioners. This is Kristen Yule, County Council. So you're correct, Chair Hunt. The moratorium is set to expire next Tuesday, which prohibits any new STR licenses regardless of zone. But as you're aware, the ballot measure 21203 was passed, and that prohibits new STR licenses in R1, R2, and R1A zones. So the recommendation at this point from staff is to not renew the moratorium, allow it to expire, and essentially follow the provisions of the ballot measure, which address any licensing and where the licensing should occur or not occur. You have any questions?
Questions or comments, commissioners?
Yeah, so, oh, go ahead, Commissioner Hall.
Oh, that's fine. Yeah, I was just, so in other words, you're saying that to continue the moratorium would be redundant since with the certification of votes last Friday, the measure is now the law of the land?
It's the law of the land, and it directly speaks to where licenses should be prohibited, just in those 3 zones. It doesn't speak to licenses in other zones, such as RR or other areas where presumably people could obtain a license.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Jacobson?
Yeah, so I guess in my own words, how I view this is we would be not opening up to, a free for all of new licenses. And I think when people, possibly watch this meeting, that they might have a little panic attack on that. So, this is not just opening up to new license. This would be sunsetting our temporary moratorium that we had. So letting that retire and then replacing it with a permanent one that would not allow any new licenses in certain areas and possibly allow new licenses in some areas based on the language in the ballot measure. So kind of following that, following that language. Am I saying that right?
A little bit. So you're right. You're correct that essentially the moratorium would expire. It will expire on the 30th unless you take action to do something differently. But essentially the ballot measure is law. The ballot measure is going to prevent anybody from applying for new licenses in those 3 zones, R1, R2, and the R1A. So
Not
you don't.
correct. I'm sorry, R1, 2, did you say?
R1, R2, and R1A. So that the ballot measure essentially prohibits any new licenses for those 3 zones. You, in effect, do not have to take any action. That's the law. We can't accept applications or grant anyone licenses if they are zoned those 3 zones. So in essence, your moratorium, though, was a blanket moratorium on all new licenses. And so essentially the discussion today, we need direction where the 3 of you want to go. If you still want a moratorium in place, or if you want just to allow the ballot measure to address the licensing. And that's staff's recommendation, is we allow the ballot measure to address the licensing and not prohibit STRs in zones that aren't specifically listed.
I have a follow-up question. So I guess one of the things I'm a little concerned about is if we do what you just said, Council Yule. I feel like, our office and the sheriff's office and the planning department are going to get a lot of calls because I don't think a lot of people really know, what their zone is. I was trying to think back of all the different properties I've rented or owned, and I'm not entirely sure I knew how all of them were zoned. So I feel like people would obviously be calling, trying to find out if their property was in a certain zone or not in a certain zone. And so I guess my question is, could we do something where we don't allow any licenses in the R1, R2, R1A as described by the ballot measure, that's done. And then as we look at a process to, allowing licenses as the ballot measure says in other areas, could we do that, but set a date for that to start, like maybe a couple months out or something, so that we could give staff time to kind of be ready for those kinds of questions and make sure we have a process that's kind of stood up for that? Because it's been 18 months, well, I guess almost 2 years since we've allowed licenses at all. So I just want to make sure that our staff is kind of ready, even though there wouldn't necessarily be a lot of licenses because those areas preclude a lot of potential new licenses. I just want to make sure that our staff has time to kind of set up that process to be ready for those inquiries.
So essentially what has been going on for the last 18 months is we have pending applications. And so all those applications have been ferreted out, so to speak, meaning that the individuals are aware of their zone. We're aware of their zone, at least for the ones that are pending. And this would probably be more of a question for Ms. Combs. I don't know if Lisa Combs is on this call or if the sheriff can speak to this, but we do have pending applications. Staff is ready to process those and move forward with a decision so we can move forward with those kind of pending applications.
Yeah.
Obviously, individuals, the majority of those, Commissioner, I would say 95% of those, maybe more, are in the R1 zone. So they're aware that they're not going to move forward with an approval because of the ballot measure passing. But I think we have maybe one pending application in an RR zone. And so I guess staff would like to move forward with resolution for these individuals. And I don't know if the sheriff has anything to add.
Sheriff Landers, any comments? Or more specifically, do you have a feel for the status of the pending applications and how many potentially would move forward under the new ordinance, or excuse me, the ballot measure?
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. Curtis Landers, Lincoln County Sheriff, for the record. I think Council Yule is corrected. The large majority of the pending applications would still be under the new ordinance that passed and would not be accepted or sent through. I think there are, I don't know how many, but I know there are just a couple of the ones that would be in the zones that would allow for it to move through.
Any other?
And we would probably be in position to accept those and move forward if the board wanted to go that direction.
Any other questions for the sheriff or comment? All right. Any other questions or comments from commissioners in general? Well, I'll say something. My concern is been partially addressed by this, just the conversation we just had. Certainly, I don't want our staff buried. We're all working harder than normal, and that's become the new norm, and probably will be for some time into the future. But to the point, I was also concerned that what is the smallest size lot that could be developed under the existing ballot measure. And I'm not clear, and I don't know if there's anyone on this at this meeting that can answer the question, but I'll put Council Herbage on the spot. Is an 2-acre lot probably the smallest lot that could be developed under this ballot measure, or would the minimal size be smaller or potentially larger? And I also recognize that there may be lots that don't conform to the zoning that were grandfathered. So any insight, Council Herbage or others on the call?
Yeah, this is, thank you, Chair. This is Jerry Herbage, and I'm an assistant county counsel, and I frequently work on land use issues. Look, I've provided to the board some maps showing some sample RR2 zoning. Largely, it's in the South County, but the point is RR2. Think of that as an important number, 2 acres, which is the minimum size if you want to, if you have a larger parcel and you want to divide. So many RR2 parcels are smaller than 2 acres. And so you can look at the maps and tell that that's the case. And so if there are, to the extent that there are such parcels and they're interested in the vacation rentals or something, I mean, that would be a possibility. So don't think that they have to be 2 acres to have a vacation rental on the parcel. Think about it, that someone zoned RR2 and they have a 4-acre parcel. Well, okay, so they could possibly get that divided depending upon other factors, so that there could be 2 parcels if they wanted to do a division. So look at it that way, and don't look at RR2 as it has to be 2 acres to have some sort of development on it.
All right, I appreciate that clarification. The point of my question was, I believe that the ballot measure, by identifying the zones that they did, is looking at areas where housing can be, frankly, pretty densely located. And your neighbor can literally be over the fence. With a 2-acre lot, it's a little bit more difficult. So in my opinion, there may be the opportunity to build an STR on some of these lots, but the density that seems to be certainly part of the issue that the ballot measure is addressing seems to be addressed by the ballot measure. So, and that, and the fact that we only have a couple of applications, to the best of our knowledge, that would be able to move forward under the ballot measure, gives me comfort in that this is a step toward addressing the density of the STRs. Thoughts or comments?
Yeah, I have a question as well for Council Urbidge. We talked about the rural residential zoning, but I guess I have an additional question about in the unincorporated part of the county. The other thing that we have that cities wouldn't have is a lot of timber conservation and ag conservation zoned land. And some of those properties, depending on the history of them and when they're established, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, may or may not have homes or residences on them. How does TC or AZ zoned property interact with this, or do we know yet? Maybe that's something we're still sorting through.
I don't see that as a major factor for vacation rentals, but I think that certainly, as you said, Commissioner, some of the TC and AC zoned parcels have homes on them. There are homes in many of the various zones, and so I don't know. I don't see that as a major issue.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Any other questions or comments? I will look to my fellow commissioners. I'm fairly confident that there are some people that are attending that would wish to comment on this issue. I'd be open to allowing public comment on this issue before we proceed, rather than having them wait until public comment on the agenda, but I'll take direction from both of you.
Well, we're not making a decision today. This is just discussion and information. So I am fine with public comment now. I just wanted to clarify for people listening that today is just.
Okay. That's a good point. Decision would have to be made by next Tuesday. Commissioner Hall?
Yeah, I would be fine with moving ahead with public comment on this right now, although technically, if our consensus is not to take action, does that constitute a decision in and of itself?
No decision is a decision, as somebody said.
Okay.
Well, in the interest of trying to honor the people that wish to comment on this subject matter, and having noted that we are not making any decision today, and we may not make any decision at all, in which case the moratorium would expire effective the end of next Tuesday. I'll ask Mr. Miller to queue up individuals that wish to comment on this particular agenda item and only on this item. The others would have an opportunity to comment later in the agenda under public comment, which is item 10.
Thank you, Chair. So for those that may want to comment, if they could use the raise hand function at this time. And while we're waiting for them to raise their hands, if they want to speak, let's go to the phone caller 3929. I believe that's Donald Richards. Donald, I didn't establish with you whether or not this was a subject that you wanted to comment on. So now's the time if it's right for you. Donald, I can see your phone sort of flashing there, but I can't hear you.
Oh, hi there. I'm waiting to speak at the end about Pacific West.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Well, I do not see here that anyone, oh, nope, there we go. All right, Jamie, you're up.
Good morning, commissioners. I'm seeking clarification and understanding. Will you be taking what was in the ballot measure and putting it in the form of an ordinance that will be clear for us all to understand and follow? Or what is the procedure here? Where would we look for these final rules?
Council Ewell.
I believe the full text of the ballot measure is on the website. And so that is what the final rule is. That's what the current law is. So I don't know if Casey, if you put it somewhere different, if it's on the STR page. But I know the full text is at least on the clerk's webpage. But Ms. Michelle, you can find it on the clerk's webpage, the full text.
Thank you.
Yeah. And yeah, we do have it online. It's linked through the sheriff's page as a licensing authority, and then it's within the county commissioners pages. So it is there if you need it.
Good information. Thank you. Any other comment on this particular item?
I think that's all we have at this moment. No one else has raised their hand, so we can move on, I believe.
All right. Well, I guess in the interests of clarity, do commissioners want this to come back as an item at our next scheduled meeting, which would be Tuesday, the 30th? Or is there a consensus to allow the resolution to expire, in which case there's no further action necessary on our part?
I would like to come back and discuss next Tuesday and make an action item.
I'm
Okay.
fine with that.
Okay, we'll bring it back. All right. Next, we move to reports, and that would be the Echo Mountain Fire update. And I'm not sure who's going to do that, Commissioner Jacobson.
I'll start, and usually Casey Miller joins me and anyone else who wants to join as well. So we had quite a bit of water in the Otis areas. I think everybody is aware of. Which was super unfortunate, but not necessarily surprising, given that we've lost a lot of vegetation in that area. There was a second sandbag filling station placed in the county. So if we, if hopefully not, but if we end up in a similar situation, there's additional sandbag materials located in the county for people to use, and even be a little proactive about that. Also, a couple of things happening with related to grants and recovery work. There was a recent request for proposals released from Oregon Watershed Enhancement Board for wildfire affected communities, for things like we were just talking about, runoff and erosion and those types of things, and reaching out to our local watershed councils. They are interested in trying to kind of put together a joint proposal together to possibly go after some of that, to help with those types of things. We also found out that the technical assistance requests that Casey and I worked on together, along with many partners, and put out that we have or will be receiving technical assistance. We had a large list of wants, and sounds like we got or will be getting our technical assistance help for water, as well as possibly, a little iffy, possibly some technical assistance on housing as well. We also found out this week that OCHS is also working on developing a tiny home village in North Lincoln County area to help on getting some families out of hotels, because the hoteling program is not going to last forever. And so working on developing a tiny home village, which would be a sort of not temporary, but not necessarily forever, sort of a longer permanent situation. So maybe they would be in there for the next 3 to 5 years, or until they're able to rebuild or find, better accommodations. But this would be a way of getting those families out of hotels and into more stabilized housing. So my understanding is they are looking at various properties right now. So if you know of potential property, a couple of acres or more in the North Lincoln County area that might be a good spot, and we are talking tiny homes here, so something flat-ish, which is hard on the coast, please let me know. I will say that last time I said this at a public meeting, someone actually emailed me, and that site, I think, is in the mix for the fixed income housing that's going up. So it really, this has been successful in the past for people listening that know of maybe properties that might be coming up for sale or whatever. So please let me know if you think of anything that might be appropriate for a tiny home village in the North Lincoln County area. We also, I think I said this in the last meeting that I was in attendance, we did hear from ODOT that we will be getting at least some money for roads, which is great. We're still waiting for that amended contract to come through, but we hopefully will have some resources there. So that is all the information I have. I will turn it over to Casey and then maybe to Roy to see if he has anything, if Roy's on, that he would like to add. Go, Casey.
Thanks, Katie. Yeah, maybe a little bit of risk of sounding redundant here, but I know we've got some new people in our meeting today. We've got quite a few people watching on YouTube. As we enter the holiday season, I just wanted everybody to know we'll be putting up some resources on the county's website in the North Lincoln Build section if the community's thinking about how they can help, because as we've all been experiencing, recovery takes some time. There'll be resources there for the community if they would like to help those in need. Keep in mind too that as we move forward with a long-term recovery group, we are looking for community members that would like to support that group for disaster response into the future and for the recovery of Otis. So stay tuned for that information. It'll be showing up on the county's website. And looking forward to a conversation today with the EPA with Katie, because I know she's going to ask some hard questions today to get us where we need to go. So it's a process. So that's about all I have for you today. Thank you.
Any questions or comments from commissioners? All right, we'll move on. Next item on the agenda is our COVID vaccination update, and that will be by Interim Public Health Director Florence Portell. Welcome, Florence.
Okay, I'm going to disclose that I have 2 little monsters that have not been listening to their mom this morning, so I have to mute myself sometime along the way. Just a minute.
I have a grandson that's running around here somewhere that gets the dog excited. So understand.
And I have 3 kids running around here as well. So you're in good company, Florence. It's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think Doug's grandson may have ate all the popcorn here. Where did it go?
He helped me deliver to my direct reports yesterday. Yes.
Success, the door is closed.
I think mine's open, but so far I've been okay.
Okay, so good to see you, commissioners. Welcome back for your week of commissionering in Eugene. So the COVID update for today, Casey, you can scroll down. So, we're still seeing a decline statewide in cases. However, the past few days, we're seeing a little bit of an uptick. As usual, COVID is pretty unpredictable. We're still watching our trends. I'll show you how we're doing in Lincoln. We definitely decreased quite a bit and have been plateauing, if not coming back up a little bit. We sustained, I believe, a 14% increase in cases over the past 2 weeks. So I'm anticipating that we're going to go back up based on the holiday season and the fact that we tend to follow what happens in Europe, and there is a surge happening, and we're also seeing an increase in cases in the US. So okay, so thank you for this slide, Casey. So as you can see,
Been there, done that.
Those numbers are as of Monday. I have a few changes. So they climbed up. This morning, we were at 3,582. In November so far, 268, 12 hospitalization, and a total of 52 deaths as of this morning. We just got the report from our AP. Our new cases per 100,000 is climbing back up. We have a plus 50 compared to last week. Our daily cases about 4 more than we had last week, like on average. So like I said, you can see a clear decrease, but if you can go to the next slide, please, Casey. So this is what I was talking about, right? Like this is us looking at what's been happening every week. So as you can see, we picked kind of like the 3rd week of August and then came back down. But as you can see, since October 24, we're kind of, actually since October 3rd, we could say that we're kind of plateauing, if not going back up a little bit. So if you can go to the next slide, because I want to show you how it compares to last year. So last year is blue, this year is red. We're comparing the total cases reported in July, August, September, October, November. Last November, we thought we got slammed with cases. We have more than twice the amount of cases at this time, and the month is not over yet. So obviously, this difference in the number of cases is due to the Delta variant, way more contagious, right? As we've experienced this summer. So, I just going back to the initial point I was making on the first slide, if you want to go back there, I don't want to be bearer of bad news, but, and I think as usual, it's kind of hard to predict, but based on what we saw last year, even though we have a lot of people vaccinated, that was the same scenario this summer. We have a lot of people vaccinated and still saw a major surge within the unvaccinated population mostly. This was the summer where we were outside. We're now coming back inside and starting to gather. So it is possible that we'll see more cases. The other reality, aside from the fact that Europe is surging, so we'll be surging, is that in the country, we've seen over the past 2 years an increase in 30% of cases. So that's also like, a metric that we want to look at. Some hospital systems in California are already like, starting to divert folks because they're full. Our hospital system is holding up really, really good. So I'm not worried there, and they've been holding their own really during the entire surge over the summer. So that's really good. So as you can see, the trend is pretty flat, a maximum of 2 cases at a time in North Lincoln. And then if you slide down, PCH is also doing pretty good. And they're absolutely not worried and very confident that they're gonna hold the floor very well. So a few things that I think we need to talk about is, we know that for those of us who have been vaccinated, we know now that the booster shot is recommended for everyone 18 and over. So I would encourage people, if it has been 6 months since their second shot, to go seek a booster shot. We still have a lot of mobile clinic happening. We've done tremendous work with the school also. We're almost through with our school clinics where we vaccinated about 500 kiddos, possibly a little bit more, which is a really good start. Our plans are to take a break on mobile clinics over the Christmas, kind of like New Year's 2 weeks. We also have decided to retire the fairgrounds after the clinic we will hold on the 17th, and then switch to a mobile clinic only model, but with a really like set schedule. So people would know every first Monday of the month, the clinic is going to be here. Every second Tuesday, it's going to be here, et cetera, et cetera. And obviously, we will focus on locations where there is not necessarily other access to vaccines. So that's the shift we're taking. We will still carry all of the vaccines during those events. And, we're also starting to think about how do we sustain that work, and how do we also transition that work to maybe other entities, just because this is not necessarily something that we can sustain forever. But at this time, we're planning on still having a team ensuring that vaccines are accessible and available to people in Lincoln County. The other piece that I wanted to discuss is that when people gather this holiday season, if they're not vaccinated, we would recommend maybe test prior to having the family gathering, just to make sure that everybody is A-okay. Wear a mask if you can, keep your distance. So, those recommendations are the same as they've always been. So this is kind of where we're at. Maybe if you want to go to the 1 or 2 slide above, Casey. Up.
Yeah, Flo, you want me to go? Yeah, just
Up.
tell me when to stop.
Stop. No.
Oh.
Down.
Okay.
This one, perfect. So this one is an interesting slide, right? We're still doing really amazing. We're, you know, in between first and second every week for vaccination rates, so, which is excellent. And, you know, our community is really happy with the work we've been doing. So that's amazing. They added, the state added, so you see the percentage of 1 dose series complete, and then extra dose, which is a little bit difficult here, is we can't necessarily say all the extra dose are booster people, because it could be a 3rd dose for people who are immunocompromised. So this is kind of a accumulation of 3rd dose and booster, and the uptick is not great, you know. So, you know, and we know that the immunity from the vaccine went over time. So, you know, especially if you are 65 and older, we really encourage you to really consider getting boosted for COVID, and possibly start thinking about the fact that this is probably something that is going to be part of our life for a very long time, and that we might need to boost every so often, so that we are keeping up with the variants. This virus is an interesting phenomenon, and like we've discussed many times before, it's very, very good at mutating and adapting. So we also ought to make sure that we do the same in a way to ensure that it stops happening, that it doesn't have any more room to adapt and mutate. So that's it. That's all.
Questions or comments from commissioners? All right, thank you, Florence. I appreciate the good information. I thought that slide that showed the comparison of the months this year versus a prior year was frankly a little bit frightening. So yes, and we haven't seen December yet. So good information, and appreciate all your hard work and hard work of your staff and volunteers and partners. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
All right, commissioner reports. Commissioner Hall, you're first on my screen.
I don't have anything to share that we haven't already discussed.
All right, Commissioner Jacobson.
Yeah, I will say that before becoming a commissioner, I spent many years working for OSU Extension and Oregon Sea Grant. And one of the things I work with with the county and Commissioner Thompson and Commissioner Hunt and Wayne Beaumont as offshore energy. And at the time it was mostly wave energy, although a little bit of offshore wind was sort of sprinkled in there. And I guess 2 things to kind of report on that. One is a siting project I actually worked on with Commissioner Hunt to site what was then called PMAC, but now is called PAC-WAVE, which will be the nation's first grid-connected offshore wave energy test site. That is actually in process of being developed finally, and they have been actually boring the cables out to the site over the last several months, and they're almost done in doing that process. So that's sort of exciting. And the second thing I just wanted to mention to the public is the kind of issue of offshore wind is coming up again. It seems to sort of pop up every few years, and it's coming again. And it looks like sometime in January, or at least that is the latest information we have, that the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, or BOEM, will be putting up lease blocks. And a lease block is kind of an area in the ocean that BOEM will say, hey, offshore wind developers, this is going to go up for lease. And then people would essentially bid on leasing that for offshore wind development. It looks like there are going to be lease blocks put out for lease in Oregon sometime in January. I have a lot of concerns about this, but I'll save all of those for a different time and just say that that is coming. And so people that are ocean users or just want to kind of learn more about that process should probably time to start tuning in. BOEM does have several workshops coming up on kind of understanding that lease process and how they're going to be taking input on potential conflicts or environmental concerns, et cetera. So those are all coming up, which are open to the public to attend. They're all virtual. So just kind of want to give everyone a heads up that this issue is coming up again.
Commissioner Jacobson, would it also be appropriate for individuals that have thoughts on that to contact our congressional group? Senators, House
Yes,
Representatives?
And specifically, I would say that Representative Schrader, I mean, you can contact all of them, I'm sure, but Representative Schrader has been the one that has shown a lot of leadership in this area and has actually every year for several years hosted kind of a stakeholder group with BOEM around offshore energy. So his office is always, you know, the one I go to first with this kind of stuff, as they are pretty engaged in that.
Yep. Yeah, he's been very involved. All right, thank you. Well, I have kind of a mishmash of items, and I used mashed purposefully since tomorrow is Thanksgiving, and at least I look forward to some mashed potatoes as part of that celebration. But a couple of things. First of all, the governor held a quarterly conference with county chairs, and the primary subject was COVID and, you know, what's the plan? What's the escape plan? And frankly, the governor's response, I think, is similar to what we heard today. It's a little bit difficult to see an end game when right now, if you were to compare the current level of cases, infection rate, hospitalizations, we're actually at higher levels than we were a year ago. And at that time, we would have been what we considered to be in an extreme situation. So very, very much aware of the concerns of people, very much aware of the frustration with vaccinations, masking, and that sort of thing. But for the time being, that seems to be the best course of action. And I certainly agree that we want to continue to wear masks. And again, Oregon Health Authority did change that recommendation from outdoors and indoors to indoors only. So certainly indoors with the Thanksgiving coming, please do your best to wear masks, recognize the value of social distancing, and certainly get vaccinations. I got my booster dose on October 28th. So seriously encourage others to do so. So that's that. Wanted to point out, I failed to do so during the COVID presentation. There are 4 clinics coming up at the fairgrounds in the next month. So certainly an opportunity there for people to get vaccinated or get boosters if that fits their schedule. And frankly, lastly, I am a descendant of the Mayflower. I think a 13th or 14th generation great grandfather was on the Mayflower, depending on which line you follow. And the first Thanksgiving was held in 1621. Not really what we recognize today as Thanksgiving. It was held probably earlier in the year, sometime in potentially late September, October. But there were only 53 passengers that survived from the transatlantic journey, roughly half of the total passengers and crew. And it was a 3-day festival, and the Plymouth colonists were outnumbered about 2 to 1 by the local Native Americans. So it's a little bit of history. I think it's a great tradition. And certainly I wish everyone a very happy Thanksgiving, and hope you have opportunity to enjoy good times and happiness with family and friends. So with that, we have now moved to public comment. Mr. Miller, who wishes to address the board?
Well, Chair, let's ask again for a few who are here with us to raise their hand if they want to speak at this time. And I do know we've got Donald Richards. You're on the phone. You are unmuted, Donald, if you want to go ahead and talk to us. I do have my my timer here for 3 minutes. So you're good to go.
Welcome.
Okay, can you guys?
Yes.
Can you go? Okay. Well, I'll keep it short and sweet. I just want to say that what's going on with Pac West is really upsetting me. I think BLS has taken a step backwards. I think it's a shortcut and it's taken the easy way out. I don't think that they're doing the best they can with what they have. I think they're just taking shortcuts. My main concern is that I don't believe BLS can diagnose critical calls. And, you know, that could be a nausea call that could end up being cardiac related. I think they're taking ambulances from other counties. I was listening to the radio the other day, and they took something from Tillamook County to respond to Seal Rock. I mean, that's a good hour, and I don't know what kind of emergencies can be handled efficiently after an hour, but I think strokes, heart attacks, trauma, stuff like that, that's not satisfactory. I'd also like to ask, why is this company a revolving door of employees? Jeff mentioned that it was all due to COVID, but there's still medics and EMTs all over this county that don't want to work there. People don't just go to college and then just quit for nothing. I think that what they're doing is burdening the fire departments to supplement a for-profit ambulance company. And I believe there's ulterior motives behind this, and I don't think they're being as transparent as it may seem. And honestly, I'm nervous. The future, like the steps that we're taking right now, is making me nervous. That's all I got.
All right, thank you. I will note that Rob Dahlman, Mr. Dahlman, who is chair of the Ambulance Service Response Committee, is still present, heard those comments. And I would encourage you to share your concerns with him and certainly address other issues with Mr. Mattia at Pac West. Any other public comment?
Well, I don't see any raised hands. We've got Shelby Merrick up. There's the hand. All right, Shelby, stand by and you should be in the clear.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, so my concern is with the ambulances. So it sounds with the advanced life support versus basic life support that an ambulance could show up and somebody without advanced training would be taking care of who's ever in the ambulance. Am I correct?
We're not in a position to address the specifics. That would be a question I would leave for either Mr. Mattia or potentially Mr. Dahlman. But this is an opportunity for comment. You can direct your questions to them or to us individually afterward, and we'll try to direct your inquiry to the proper source.
Okay, well, if that's the case, I would just, any ambulance that shows up, I would like somebody with advanced training to be taking care of myself or my family. I'm also a teacher with the school district, and it's just alarming to me that this is something that's happening, because I would prefer advanced training for whatever's going on.
All right, any other comments, Mr. Merrick?
No, thank you.
All right, well, again, Mr. Dahlman is still present and certainly can share those concerns. Other public comment, Mr. Miller?
I may not be getting this right, but it looks like Linley Galeo is with us, but I don't see a hand raised. So I think we've made our way through all present people. Oh, you probably want to see the online public comment too, though.
Yes,
Oh,
please.
yes, let me find that for you. We have received comments, and it is on the county's website, if I can get us there. And so can you see the website there on your screen?
Yes.
Okay, so here is where we have put the input that's come in over the last a couple weeks, actually, since we didn't have our meeting last week. So you can see that here in supporting documents. Our smart sheet is where that information comes in, and we can see the list of individuals here. Some of this input is short-term rental specific to the meeting and the subject at hand, but we also take out that which is STR related and put it here on the STR page at the bottom as combined input. And then back to an earlier inquiry about the measure and what is happening. We're updating this page so citizens can look here for any recent information that's happening. So for example, today I will put up that we are going to be discussing the moratorium again and other related issues to short-term rentals will be here. So that's all I have for you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Miller. Any other business to come before the board at this time? All right. Our next meeting of the Lincoln County Board of Commissioners will be held on Tuesday, December, boy, I wish, Tuesday, November 30th. We don't want to get through Christmas that quickly. Tuesday, November 30th at the same time, 10 p.m. That will be the next meeting of the regular meeting of the Lincoln County Board of Commissioners. With no other business to come before us, until then, we are adjourned. Happy Thanksgiving to everyone.